Hello Financial Hub. So today I want to talk about the coronavirus and how it is affecting the world. So this is simply just to catch your attention and we can do away with it. Much better. So today we are going to talk about the coronavirus, if it's an epidemic or a pandemic. So what's the difference between a pandemic and an epidemic? An epidemic is simply a disease that happens within a local community, within a certain country, and at a certain particular time. It doesn't spread as much. When you go into a pandemic, is when this disease has not been contained and is spreading out of a country and is going global, or rather international. Pandemics also kill more people than epidemics because it affects more people around the world. So examples of epidemics include SARS, which happened in 2003, way back in China, and it killed around 800 people, and after that it was contained, so it didn't spread into a pandemic. So when we go into pandemics, we have many examples. We can start by looking at a pandemic that happened in the 14th century, known as the plague, or the Great Plague, or other people, this is not commonly known as that, but they also call it the Black Death. This happened between 1314, around that time, in the 14th century, and killed around 75 million to 200 million people. So those are pandemics. It's global. It kills a lot of people. Compare that with SARS, which killed at least 800 people. That's a very small number. Another example of a pandemic is HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS has been there since the 20th century and has crossed into another century, which is the century we live in right now. We can see between 2005 and 2012, it killed about 35 million people. So it's also a pandemic that hasn't yet been contained. If we go back into time, we can also look at influenza. Influenza has happened time and time again. Back in 1918, we had the Spanish influenza, and late 2009, we had the swine flu. So when the Spanish flu came, the first influenza that we experienced in a global scale, which happened to move from animals into humans, came right after the World War I. Comparing World War I and the influenza itself, World War I killed approximately 16 million people in terms of record. But looking at Spanish flu, killed about 40 to 50 million people. So you can see how bad pandemics are compared even to World War. Pandemics is something that Bill Gates said we are not yet prepared to be able to tackle pandemics when they come.
Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this.
We've not yet contained HIV virus, so that is an example that we need more infrastructure, more research into the side of diseases and health. The worst example that the worst pandemic that has ever existed is smallpox. Smallpox has been there for about 12,000 years, and luckily or fortunately, it was eradicated from the world in the late 20th century. It had lasted for about 12,000 years, and approximately it had killed between 300 and 500 million people in total. So you can look at that example and see pandemics are worse than world wars. It kills much more people. So when a pandemic occurs, it affects the global economy. That's why people take it seriously. It's not a game, and it's not something to be taken just as another ordinary thing happening in the world. So moving on, we have to understand something very important, that back then, 10,000 years ago, or rather more than 10,000 years ago, humans started living in communities and started living together with animals, and that's when the spillover started. We started building cities, we started seeing developments happening, and that while developments were happening, people used to have animals, live with them as their wealth, or depending, their pets or whatever. So ever since that time is when we started seeing spillovers of diseases from animals to human beings. Examples are tuberculosis, influenza, measles, smallpox, etc. Right now, we are living in an urbanization era where we are living as a community. Everyone is in for example, here in Nairobi, here in town, our houses, we live in gated communities, we have apartments, we're all living together. So during that moment, such diseases are very easy to spread from animals to humans and from humans to other humans. So that's why we easily get pandemics, because the spread is really easy. When coronavirus started, they didn't know how exactly it was spreading from people, but now later on, when we started realizing from coughing, sneezing, mutual touch with one another, touching objects with the virus and then touching your ears, your nose, your eyes, that starts affecting and spreading faster. So right now, at this moment, when you think of it, what researchers are saying is that we are having mass production of animals such as pigs, hens, and etc. And because of that rapid growth of animals, these diseases are really hard to eradicate from the face of the earth, because it's spreading from animals way faster than it's entering into humans. So we cannot kill every animal just to kill one disease. So because we can't eradicate, we can't get to know exactly where it is. I earlier on said the plague, or the Great Plague, or the Black Death, which killed about 75 to 200 million people, still exists till today because it's found in rodents. So it's rodents, which includes rats and what have you. We can't get to kill all the rats just to eradicate the disease. So how is coronavirus affecting the global economy? To understand this, you need to look back at how big China is compared to the whole global economy. So back in 1960, the GDP of China was $60 billion. Compare that with the USA, which was the leading world economy at that time. Its GDP at that time was around more than $540 billion. That was in 1960. Looking at it right now, China has a GDP of over $13 trillion. $13 trillion. Compare that with the USA at the moment. It has a GDP of over $20 trillion. So if you look at 1960, at that time when China had a $60 billion GDP, America had a tenfold difference, almost around tenfold difference between China and the USA. But looking at it right now, with China being the second largest economy, it has a difference of about $6 trillion. So that difference, it means that China is going rapidly fast. If we look back in 2003, when SARS came out back in China, China at that time was the 6th largest economy in the world, and USA was number 1. And looking at it right now, with China being the second largest economy in the world, it means that for the past 14 years, since 2004, 2003 to 2020, on average, every 3.5 years, China has been climbing up the ladder on the list of the world's largest economy. If it continues at this rate, very soon China will become the largest economy in the world. So when you have the largest economy in the world, if anything happens to your country, if anything happens to USA, if anything happens to China, it affects the whole world. And that's why we get the saying, when USA sneezes, the whole world catches a flu. And right now, we can see that with China. So when China sneezes, the whole world catches a flu. And we can see that happening with the coronavirus. So it's spreading really fast. We've talked about urbanization, how it's growing rapidly within people and spreading faster because we are now a global economy. We are traveling from one country to another. So all that affects the world. So now that we have a brief understanding of history, how pandemics have affected the world, and that doesn't mean that now coronavirus is a pandemic. It hasn't yet been declared by the World Health Organization that it's a pandemic. So far it's still an epidemic until the World Health Organization declares it. So how has coronavirus affected the global economy? I won't get deep into that because Ken covered most of the stocks, airlines, commodities, how it was affected. But I'll just do a sort of a recap of last week and basically what happened. So we can see when we look at oil, you know, the world runs on oil, so everyone in the world needs oil. No country can survive without oil at the moment. And looking at China, China is the largest importer of oil. That means there's a lot of demand when it comes to oil in China. China being the leading world economy, being the second leading economy in the world, and having that high number in terms of importing oil, if anything happens in that country, it will affect the whole world. So we've seen last week oil prices dropped more than 14%, and that is also sort of a follow-up from oil, and that was just last week. from the beginning of the year, we've seen oil drop from as high as $65 mark. Now we are ranging at around $47.5 mark due to different reasons as well as the coronavirus. So oil demand in China has reduced by more than 20%. When that happens, it means the people who are mining or rather drilling oil have a lot of stock up. So the supply and demand, for those who did business in school, the supply is a lot but the demand is little. So looking at it from China, many shops are closed, that meaning the manufacturing sector, most of them have closed down. People are not going to work so that they can quarantine the disease so that it doesn't spread as much. And you know, or rather we know, that China is a big manufacturing hub in the world, and many companies rely on it because of their cheaper labor compared to other parts of the world. And these manufacturing sectors need oil in order to run, so such as running the equipment and all that, we need oil. So when they were not having shops open, or rather the manufacturing sector, the oil demand has reduced. People are staying at home, people are not using their cars, we know cars run on oil, and many other necessities that need oil are not being used at the moment. So that hits the oil prices. When we move on to gold, gold is a sort of a hedge when there are many uncertainties in the world. And looking at oil prices, it has been surging. Ken has been analyzing gold for the past few weeks. He's been talking about the coronavirus. We've been talking about interest rates, how different economies are lowering their interest rates so that they can help the economy be kicked back, so that we can continue with growth. But for the past few weeks, we've been seeing stocks falling. We've been seeing gold rising as a hedge to these uncertainties in the world. So those are things you should look at. We also go down to currencies. US dollar and yen. Yen has been the best performing G10 currency in the world because of people running to it as a safe haven. The US dollar has also been performing well, but not as much as the yen pairs. So that's basically how the coronavirus is affecting the global commodities, currencies, and also the stock market. Before we finish, we need to look at how the stock market has been performing when we have pandemics in the world, so that we can know, because we deal with the finance industry, we need to know where we are going, where we're going next. So if you look back at SARS, when SARS affected the world, back in 2003, when it happened in China, we saw the S&P 500 within the first 12 months after the outbreak occurred, gained more than 20%. So that means during the first few months we had that drop, which our prices in the stock markets were discounted, and now we could buy in and the market rose more than 20% in the next 12 months. When we look at swine flu, which happened back in 2009, where the S&P 500 gained more than 35%. When we look at Ebola, which happened in 2014, the market within the next 12 months, S&P 500 gained over 15%. So when you're looking at history, many of these pandemics, when they occur, we sort of have a reaction in the market within the first few months when prices fall down, and after that the prices start shooting, mainly when the virus has been contained and when people start gaining back confidence in their country. We are seeing the world economy, the global markets, or rather the economies in the world have lowered their interest rates to help such improvements, to kick back the economy so that more investors can come back into the country and buy their assets and all. So for now, we are still hanging in between the fence. We don't know if the World Health Organization will come out a week later on and declare this as a pandemic.
The world is now at the start of the 2009 influenza pandemic.
We don't know how investors are looking at different countries. We also don't know the exact figures of what is happening in the countries that are being affected by the coronavirus. We know the global economy, with their rules, some countries won't give us the right data, so they will withhold some current information that is really important to us investors. So such information is not yet being priced into the markets because we don't know about it. So we're still there, we're 50-50, we're still yet to look at the markets, understand the markets exactly, to know where we're going in the next few months, in the next few decades. So far, we already know the stock market has been hit. A lot of the profits, or rather the gain that has happened early on this year, or rather 2019, has all been wiped out within a few weeks of the markets being traded. For the past, let's say 2 to 3 weeks, market has been dropping. We're sort of getting a sort of rebound. We've been seeing the markets happening on Monday and Tuesday yesterday. So we're still there, we're still in between the lines, but understanding history, which was the main importance of this video, where the market has come, what has been happening, which pandemics have been existing, and how markets reacted to it. So we're yet to see, we'll do a follow-up video, but that is what I have for now. Basically just information on the coronavirus and how it's affecting the world. So we'll see you on another video. We might do another recap, follow-up of this video to show you where the market has been happening, but so far we're still uncertain, hanging between the fence. So that's all I have for you guys, and I'll see you in another video.